Did you know that over 1.4 million mortgages were approved in the UK in 2023 alone? And yet, the thousands of first time buyers, immigrants, and even working professionals getting on the property ladder still feels like an impossible dream. Whether you're dealing with a complex visa status, contract work, or limited credit history, the UK mortgage market can be overwhelming. That's why, in today's episode, we are diving deep into the realities of mortgage approval in the UK. So, what's changed? What lenders are really looking for, and how you can improve your chances of getting approved. But I'm not doing this alone. I have brought in an expert, Ripley, a seasoned mortgage advisor and founder of First Time Finance. Together, we'll answer some of the most frequently asked questions, from income requirements and credit scores to getting a mortgage on a skilled worker visa and how self employed or international applicants can navigate the system. If you're planning to buy property in the UK now or in the future, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. So let's kick off today's episode by welcoming Ripley. Hi, Ripley. Welcome to Your Knowledge Buddy. And if you don't mind, can you please introduce yourself to my audience, please?
Of course. Thank you for having me. So my name's Ripley Salguero. I'm the founder of First Time Finance, and we specialise in helping people that have moved over to the UK, so visa holders, for example, to actually buy their first home here. We're a mortgage broker here in the UK.
How many people have you already helped to buy a home in the UK?
We've helped hundreds of people.
Already.
Yeah, hundreds of visa holders already in the UK.
That's amazing news. Yeah. So I believe now my audience can also take your service and you can help them also buying a home.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So given that you are an expert in this area, my today's topic is all about the UK mortgage for visa holders, because most of the audience who watch my video are immigrants. So I think this topic is going to help them. So I've written a couple of questions for you. And if you don't mind, can I just go through one by one and ask your expertise on it?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question is, what are the most significant changes to UK mortgage rules for the visa holders in 2025 compared to previous years?
I think it's, as an overarching part to this, I think that the rules have opened up quite positively. So
Nice.
I think that a couple of things: lower deposit requirements, firstly. So whereas previously, if we went back 5 or 10 years ago, it was quite common to require a 25% deposit in order to buy your home if you're in the UK on a visa, right? And that's a lot of money. If you're going to buy a home of £400,000, it's £100,000 that you'd have to put down. Whereas now there are lending options available with as little as 5 or 10% deposit,
Amazing.
which is, of course, a much smaller amount that you need to save up in order to buy. So that's one part of it. I also think, to do with residency status as well, there are lenders that can be a lot less strict. So in terms of the type of visa that they require you to have, or the length of time remaining on your visa, there are definitely lenders out there that are a lot easier to go ahead with.
Okay. I remember when we bought our first property and we didn't get our ILR that time. And I had to pay, or we had to pay 25% deposit at that time.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy for us. And now when I hear people saying, with a very less deposit, they're able to buy a house, and that's very interesting and encouraging for anyone who's willing to invest in properties here.
Definitely. I mean, 25% deposit it's a lot, right?
I know. Yes. Okay. Amazing news. Okay. So moving to the next question, Ripley, thank you. Can you explain the new eligibility criteria or documentation requirements that lenders are asking from visa holders this year?
Yeah. So I think the easiest way of explaining this very clearly is that how mortgage lenders look at things is based on 4 key requirements, right? And these 4 key requirements are, firstly, your residency status. So that means the type of visa you're on, how long is remaining on the visa, and how long you've actually been in the UK. So that's the first point. The second requirement is your deposit. So that's how much you've got and where it's coming from. The third is your income. So, of course, that's a very important part. It's how much you're earning, but also the structure of those earnings as well. And then the fourth requirement is your credit profile.
Yes.
So each one of these matters a lot. And as I was explaining with residency status and the deposit, it's changed a lot as well quite recently. So these changes have been positive, but it also makes it quite difficult to know which lender to go to, what bank is best for your circumstances, and what they actually need as well.
Yeah.
So for the residency status, just as an example, previously you would have required the BRP, right? You'd have the card, but that came to an end at the end of December 2024. So now they're looking at share codes instead.
Yeah.
So there's all these small changes that have happened recently that they're positive. They actually make it easier, but it's important to know what you actually require when you go through the process of applying.
Okay. So Ripley, from the applications that you have done so far for the immigrants, what was the shortest period on the visa the person had?
Less than 3 months, actually. So I think...
What?
Yes, yeah, I know. So we've actually done it with, I think it was about just under 2 months, about 7 weeks remaining on their visa. They were getting an extension, so it was a skilled worker visa, but they hadn't yet agreed that because most employers will only do it at about 6 weeks remaining, a lot of them. So they hadn't actually got proof of the extension. It's quite rare for lenders to allow that, but because of the profile of the client, or what we would say in terms of their income and their job, they were able to be comfortable with it. So it's quite surprising, right, that you can do that with that little time remaining.
Because what I knew, at least at the time when we were going through the process for the first time, I think we were said you need to have minimum 2 years of working visa here to be eligible to even for any lender to give you that amount of money.
Yeah.
So now when you're saying 3 months, oh my God, that's a massive step forward rather than backward.
Exactly. And I mean, there are still lenders with minimum requirements. So there is a particular lender that's still got a 2-year minimum requirement if you're using a 5% deposit, for example.
Right.
So there are still those requirements in place, but there are some lenders that can do pretty much almost nothing remaining. As long as you've got at least 12 months remaining on it, we should be fine. If it's less, we just need to be a bit more careful about which lender we're going to.
And do you think that they also ask for employer's letter? If you are renewing your visa, do they need to see that kind of confirmation that yes, the visa will be renewed for say another 1 year, 2 year? Do they ask for such kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. Again, it depends on the lender. So sometimes, for example, if a lender's got a 6-month minimum requirement and we're below that, of course, if the employer is happy to provide such a letter, if they've got 3 or 4 months remaining on the current visa to say, yes, we are going to be extending this, that can sometimes make the lender a bit more comfortable with it.
Yeah, good. Amazing. Okay, thank you so far. I'm moving to the next question now, Ripley. How have interest rates or deposit requirements shifted for foreign nationals or those on temporary visas?
Yeah, this has changed a lot. So as I was saying, right, you start with 25% deposit 5 or 10 years ago that you need, which is just a huge amount of money to expect someone to have, especially when moving costs to the UK are so high, visa costs, etc. Right, you're already tens of thousands of pounds out of pocket. So to then expect someone to have 50,000, 100,000 as a deposit is quite ridiculous, really. So now, saying that, okay, you might only need 5% or 10% as a deposit is a massive step in the right direction. There are, for applicants with British passport or ILR, there are actually options available with 0 deposit, believe it or not. Those have come back into the market. Whether or not that's a good idea is a different conversation. I think it's higher risk, right? Because if the property value decreases, then you're actually in negative, what we call negative equity, right? Your loan is worth more than the actual property itself. So it's quite risky. But there are lenders like that available. But if you're in the UK on a visa, 5% is the absolute minimum at the moment. The interest rates are higher with a 5% deposit. So that's a very important
How
thing
much
to know.
is it?
Of course, it depends on the time. So it depends when people would be watching this, right? But as of today, when we're speaking, it depends again on your income and a few other factors. But they're going to range, if you're on a visa, 5% deposit, between about 5.25% up to 6%-ish. Right? So it really depends. Whereas with a 10% deposit at the moment, it's going to be a lot lower. So the cheapest we could get to would be about low 4% with a 10% deposit. So you can see it's quite a big difference.
Yeah. Okay. And I think people, based on their circumstances, they opt for it because that is the best available for them, right?
Yeah, I think when you look at it as a step to get onto a property, right? So, of course, if you're looking at 5% deposit and interest rates are higher versus a 10% deposit, I think it all depends on how long it will take you to get to a 10% deposit, right? Because if you're going to pay rent for another 2 years in order to save up to a 10% deposit, maybe it's better to buy with a 5% deposit, we can lock in the initial interest rate for 2 years, and then we can look at remortgaging in 2 years' time, and potentially they can increase their equity in the property during that period. So it's almost like a stepping stone rather than you're locked in, you've locked in your interest rate for 25 years. It's not how it works in the UK, which is, I think, a positive thing.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much for explaining that very well, Ripley. Thank you. So now I'm going to move to the next section of the questions, which is all about lender requirements. So my question to you is, are there any specific types of visas that are now favored or restricted by major UK lenders?
Yeah, I think the main one to start with here is skilled worker
visa.
Yeah,
90% of the people.
Exactly. There we go. I mean, it's the most favoured visa. So if we're looking at visas, that's the one that lenders like to see the most. However, you might be surprised that actually it is possible to get a mortgage even with a graduate visa, even with some lenders a student visa, although of course there are then working requirements or with those, so it can be a lot more difficult to actually get the loan amount that you need, but they can still accept it in principle. So I would say skilled worker visa would be the first one. If we're going beyond that, then also let's say one partner has got indefinite leave to remain or a British passport and the other is on a spousal visa, for example, or a dependent visa, then that's also a really good combination that quite a lot of lenders can be comfortable with. And then if we go beyond that, there's still, as I said, graduate visas, ancestry visas, global talent visas, all of those are still completely fine with a lot of lenders.
Okay, so I learned something new today. I wasn't aware that there are lenders available to give it to student visa or graduate visa. At least during our time when I was exploring it, when people were asking me, I couldn't find or understood that there are lenders who are ready to give it to the students. But now, even on a graduate visa, students can buy a property if they want.
Exactly. Yeah. So if they come out of university, for example, they go on to their 2-year kind of graduate visa.
Yeah.
They could buy a property. Of course, it's then just getting the deposit together.
I hope the students are listening already. And if you need help, you know where to go, right? Okay, thanks, Ripley. The next one is, what are the biggest challenges visa holders face when applying for a mortgage in 2025? And how can they best prepare? Of course, through your guidance, we know you don't need to worry. But if you have to give some tips, what it would be?
I think there's two main points here that I'd make. I think the first one is a lack of understanding of how this works. And this is, to me, it's an understandable thing, right? I mean, if you're in a new country, you've moved over here a couple of years ago, it's very difficult to understand the process. And I know even if you're born in the UK, I mean, the process here is very, very confusing. I'm sure you'll know that, and going through legal process and things like that.
Of course.
It's very, very complicated. I would say too complicated or overcomplicated. But I think a lack of understanding of the process in general is of course it's not something you can necessarily do a huge amount up front, but if you just take the time to try and understand a bit more, educate. Of course, if you're watching this, you're already doing that.
Yeah.
But also seeking expert guidance.
Yeah.
And of course, that's something we specialize in, is helping people on visas to buy their home here. So we have a big emphasis on not just doing someone's mortgage, not just getting you a mortgage offer, but also guiding you through the entire process as well. Because to us, I think that's very, very important, is to make sure our clients always know what is the next step in that process. The second point I would mention is to do with the deposit. And it's really the deposit source, because this is something we see huge issues with. And it's actually something that can become an issue later on in the process. And that's a huge problem, because if you've already spent money on legal fees, going through the process, etc., and all your time as well, finding a property and actually moving ahead, and then you get right to the end of the process and your solicitor says, oh, sorry, we can't sign off your deposit funds, that's a big problem.
True.
And we do see it happen, unfortunately. So it's really important to prepare properly. And really the main thing that can catch people out here is large transactions coming into their bank account. So if you, in some cultures, they use kind of revolving savings schemes, for example. That's a big one that banks don't like. If there's community savings and they're sending money in between each other, it's fine to do. But then when it comes to using it as deposit source, a bank or a solicitor just won't sign it off. And the only reason is because they just can't prove where the money has actually come from. And that's what they really care about. So I would say my tip would really be, Ideally, you want it to just be savings that you've built up from work. You can get a gift, but most lenders will only accept that from what they say as immediate family members.
Correct.
So we have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, we had the same problem as
Yeah.
well because our family's in India, so they had transferred some funds to buy the property, and that was a big amount, which was reflecting on our bank statements. And then we had to get a letter from our family back in India, stamped by the bank, along with his bank statement that that was a transaction made and that was a gift given to us. And
Yeah.
so we went through that whole process ourselves during the first property that we bought, actually.
Yeah.
So
And it's not easy, right?
No,
and,
no.
and funds from abroad can be fine, by the way. I think I'll stress that point. If you've
Yeah.
got money abroad, almost no matter where it is, there are some countries where it wouldn't be acceptable, but the majority would be completely fine.
Yeah.
It can be used. Again, it's just you need to prepare the documentation, right? Because I'm sure
Yeah.
in your experience, you've probably seen they ask for a lot.
Yeah. It was a long time ago. Maybe things are better now. But yes, thanks for highlighting that. And
Yeah.
I hope my audience is also listening and making a note of it. Thank you so far. So moving to the next one. So the next question for you is, have you noticed any changes in how lenders assess overseas income or foreign credit histories that we were kind of talking about?
Yeah, this is actually a really, really good question because it's something that has opened up quite a lot more, and I didn't really mention it earlier, but it is something that more lenders have started to look at. So obviously, to take the two parts of your question, firstly, the actual foreign currency income. There are lenders that can look at this, and there's quite a lot of currencies that can be acceptable as well. The main ones, of course, being US dollar, euro, Indian rupee is completely fine. You've got Swiss franc and things like that. They all can be acceptable. Of course, if we're looking at, there's hundreds of lenders in the market, it's a very small percentage that will accept these. Like probably looking at about 5% of all the lenders would accept foreign currency income. That's not as bad as it sounds, though, because some of those lenders are mainstream lenders with good interest rates. So although it's a small selection, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get much worse interest rates. We have clients that have foreign currency income, so businesses in Europe and abroad, or they still work a job in a foreign country, and maybe they're partly in the UK and partly not. So it definitely can work. On the side of the credit profile, the reason this question was so interesting to me is we've actually seen recently a couple of lenders come out saying that they'll start to accept credit history from foreign countries. Yeah. So it is very interesting because there are a couple of lenders that can take credit files from, there's a lot of European countries, US, again, India's on there, and there's a lot of other countries. And that can be acceptable as well. So that's particularly useful if, let's say, someone's moved over to the UK in the last 6 to 12 months. They have a lack of credit history in the UK, but they could prove kind of credit viability from their home country. And that can be quite useful.
This is interesting because, again, from my story, when we were trying, we didn't know when we can apply for or get a mortgage. We didn't know if we're eligible, first of all. I was so naive. I did not even know that I can buy a property, when I was on a visa. I didn't know that, those. And now credit history being taken from your own home country, which is, again, very positive news actually for people. Because you know what, the next question I was about to ask you, when do you think people can start, or what have you seen, the minimum stay they have done here before they could buy a property? So you said around even 3 months, 6 months people can do.
Yeah, it is possible. I would say if you're 3 or 6 months, you'd expect slightly higher interest rates because the lenders that typically do that, of course, they are priced higher. They know they're the only ones. And I guess that's how anything works in business, right? They know there's a lack of supply and there's lots of demand, so they charge a higher price. So it can be better to hit the 12-month mark for a couple of reasons. One, you get access to some of the cheaper lenders who have this 12-month minimum residency requirement. And also with that, your credit profile has had a chance to build up a bit as well. So if you've moved into the UK and you've taken some steps to build up credit, then that can really, really help.
Yeah, amazing news. Thank you so far. I think I have kind of covered most of the questions which I really wanted to do. And I just have a couple of more questions. So because you're dealing with so many applications already now and help people, So I'll ask you questions about some real stories, examples that you can share. So could you share a recent story of a visa holder successfully securing a mortgage under the new rules, and what their application stand out? Why do you think the application stand out?
Yeah, I've got a particular story that comes to mind, and it's a very recent one. They've actually just completed on their home purchase, and this one's particularly interesting because I think it highlights something that, again, I haven't mentioned in all of this. I've mentioned how complex their things are. There's lots of different requirements, but there's another thing that actually matters, and it's how your case is presented to the lender. And this is massive because as someone that's buying a property, right? So you've moved to the UK in the last couple of years, you're buying a property. Let's say you go to your bank and you apply for a mortgage. You don't know how to put that forward in the best possible way. So this story is actually two clients that were buying homes. So they had their offer accepted. They were working with another broker, so they didn't know who we were at this point. They'd unfortunately been declined by that lender through a mortgage broker. And then they found us online and they reached out. And when I was speaking to them, it became quite apparent that the lender that they'd actually gone to was probably the right lender to go to. So I started looking at the reason for the decline and reached out to the lender. And having worked in this space and solely in this space for visa holders, we've got some very good relationships. So I was able to find out a bit to do with it. And I still thought this could actually work. So we got the pre-approval done. We spoke with the lender. They were happy to take another application for the same clients. And we ended up getting them approved by the same bank that had actually declined them previously, about 2 weeks before. Wow. And it was really just restructuring the application, looking at the income. They had certain elements of their income that the other broker hadn't used, so it wasn't affordable, which we knew we were able to use. And we structured that. We put a very long note on there explaining the client's circumstances. And through putting that forward, we managed to get it approved. And now they've actually moved in. Yeah.
It's how you stitch those stories together and along with the evidence of income or whatever it is. Yeah.
It matters a lot.
Nice. Good one. Okay. What common mistakes do visa holders make during mortgage process, and how they can avoid in current climate?
Yeah, I think the first one I'll mention is not working with like a specialist advisor, right? Yes. And I know I might be biased a bit saying that, right? It's what we do, but the reason we do what we do is because there's such a huge problem. And that problem is that people that have moved over here, visa holders, they're not getting the right advice. They're getting generic advice from just any mortgage broker. Yeah. And that's not to knock any other mortgage brokers. I used to work as a more general mortgage broker before I started First Time Finance. But I saw this was a huge issue because people were getting told, and still do, you need a 25% deposit. You need 3 years of UK address history, and all of these things, right? So it's almost not possible. And people think, okay, I just can't buy. I'll wait till I've got ILR, or I'll have to wait until I've got 3 years of UK address history. But it's not true. So I think in that sense, I think working with a specialist advisor like ourselves that really does understand how to get you approved as a visa holder, and not just how to get you approved, but how to go to the right lender, also giving you honest advice as well, because it's a very big financial decision. So you want to make sure that you're getting advice from someone that actually has your best interests at heart, really. And that's something that we do really pride ourselves on. I think another point with this would be just to touch on the deposit source again. Just make sure that you're preparing in advance, ideally with it being savings, if there's any gifts. Of course, I'll refer back to my first point here again. If you're working with a specialist advisor like ourselves, this is something we would be talking you through one-on-one anyway.
Yeah. Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
Yeah. You are a British. So what made you think of a niche for immigrants? Because now you are helping mostly the immigrants, because that was the most problem area, because they were the one who was facing more issues.
Yeah.
The local people or the British people, they have things easier, and there are many people available. Yeah. So what made you think of making a niche in the area where you can help the immigrants?
The truth is, it means a lot to me. So I don't know if you noticed by my surname, I have migrant origins. So my grandfather migrated over to the UK from Spain, Salguero. It's a northwestern Spanish surname. So he migrated over to the UK when he was about 30, I think, if I remember correctly, and he was able to buy his own home. So he managed to do that, and I've seen the effect that that's had on my family. My late grandmother had to go into care. how that was paid for was actually through that home. So to me, it means a lot for people to be able to get onto the property ladder. It means a lot more than just buying a home to live in. It is a legacy for generations, and it really can be a massive thing. So there's that side of it. To me, it's massive. It makes me feel like I've got a purpose with my origins as well, and also just it was a huge problem that I saw. I saw that these people weren't getting helped properly, and to me, that's wrong, especially when moving country. I mean, I've never done it myself, right? As I said, I know my grandfather did, but I know through speaking to my clients how difficult that is. If you've got kids and you're having to take them out and put them into schools and they've got to get used to everything, you've got to get used to work, you've got to pay all the fees. It's a lot, right? So I think for people going through that journey to not have a company that's there for them to be able to actually help them specifically is wrong. So that's why we're there to do what we're doing.
That's inspiring. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Ripley, thank you very much so far. We have discussed a lot today and I learned a lot, and I think my audience is going to help learn a lot as well. Any final piece of advice for people who are watching today's video?
I think just to believe that it is possible, because I think that we speak with so many people, or they come across us online and they go, I didn't know I could buy. I thought I had to wait. So I think if you can take anything away from this is belief, firstly, and actually understanding that you don't need a 25% deposit. You likely don't need 3 years of UK address history. You very likely can buy with your visa, right? So I think it's believing and understanding that. And then taking the steps forward to save up the deposit, or if you've already got it, then actually starting to work with a specialist advisor. So I think it's that kind of belief part and understanding that it is actually possible to buy.
Oh, amazing. Thank you very much. So Ripley, if my audience wants to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I mean, you can find us online pretty much anywhere: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. But you can also book in a call with us directly through a link, which I'm sure you'll share in the description.
In the description, pin comment as well. And if you don't mind, can you just repeat the name of your brand or website so that people can also look out for you?
Yeah, so you'll find me online as Ripley Salguero, and the company First Time Finance, and we'll also leave an email address in the description as well, so you can contact us there.
Good. Thank you very much. Perfect. And all the best to you. And thank you for helping my audience as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Sarika.